You're in a meeting. Someone asks a question you've been sitting with for 20 minutes, turning over quietly, connecting the dots no one else has connected yet. You know the answer. You know it clearly. And then someone else says it, a little louder, a little more confident, and the room nods. And you think, I was going to say that. You didn't. You waited. You second-guessed. You told yourself you weren't sure enough, weren't ready, might be missing something. So you stayed quiet. You let the moment pass, and no one knew. That's not the first time that's happened. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you already know that. Because this is what it actually looks like. Not a woman who doesn't know things. A woman who knows things. And spends enormous energy making sure no one notices how much. You soften your language before you speak. I might be wrong, but you weren't wrong. This is probably a dumb question. It wasn't. You frame certainty as uncertainty, so habitually you've stopped noticing you're doing it. The hedge has become the sentence. You let someone else take the credit sometimes. Not because you don't care, you care deeply. Stepping forward to claim it feels dangerous in a way you can't quite name. So you stay slightly behind, slightly smaller, just enough. You don't talk about what you've read, what you've figured out, what you've been piecing together at 11 p.m. in ways most people around you haven't thought through. You keep it internal. You bring it out in quiet, useful ways, through questions, through suggestions framed as suggestions, never as I know this. And in conversations, you monitor yourself. Did I say too much? Did I sound arrogant? Did I make them feel stupid? The internal audit runs constantly. You replay what you said and look for the moment you crossed a line. A line no one told you existed, but that you are somehow certain is there. You have been called a lot of things in your life. Perceptive, thoughtful, quiet, good at listening. And you've accepted all of those as compliments. But there are other words that have also floated through, intimidating. A lot. Too intense. And those ones landed differently. Those ones stayed. If you've spent years making yourself easier to be around by making yourself smaller to understand, drop a 1 in the comments. You'd be surprised how many women are reading this right now, thinking the same thing. What you're doing has a name in psychology. It's called self-concealment, and specifically in the context of intelligence, researchers call it ability self-silencing. It was studied in depth by psychologist Dana Jack, whose work on self-silencing showed that women often mute the parts of themselves they've learned are unwelcome. Not because those parts don't exist, but because expressing them has historically come at a social cost. And this is not a character flaw. It is a rational response to a specific kind of environment. Here's what's happening in the brain. When we experience social rejection, even mild social friction, even just the anticipation of being seen as too much, the brain's threat detection system activates. The amygdala fires. The same neural pathways that respond to physical danger respond to the possibility of social exclusion. Being perceived as arrogant, as threatening, as difficult, the brain doesn't distinguish that from actual danger. It just knows this is risky. Pull back. For women specifically, there is a documented double bind that researchers at Harvard have described. Women who display high competence are often rated as less likable. Women who display warmth are rated as less competent. Assertiveness reads as aggression. Confidence reads as aggression. There is a very narrow corridor of acceptable self-expression. And a woman who has been bumping against those walls since childhood learns, over time, exactly how narrow it is. So she adapts. She starts speaking in softer containers. She qualifies, she deflects. She makes her intelligence available in ways that don't ask anyone to acknowledge it directly. It is not stupidity. It is strategy. The problem is, she started the strategy so long ago, she forgot she was doing it. Think back, not to last year, further. Was there a version of you, maybe 8, maybe 10, maybe 12, who knew something the adults around her didn't? Who figured out the dynamic before anyone named it? Who read the room faster than anyone else and used that reading to survive? Maybe you grew up in a house where being smart was quietly threatening, where your knowing things made someone else feel smaller, and you learned early that smaller was safer. So you started hiding what you understood. Not all of it, just enough to keep the peace. Or maybe the message was more indirect than that. Maybe you watched a mother or a woman you loved dim herself in rooms where bright women weren't welcome. Maybe you absorbed the lesson without anyone speaking it. Be capable, but don't let it be inconvenient. Maybe it was school. The first time a boy explained your own answer back to you, and the teacher nodded. And you sat quietly with the strangeness of that. The first time being right out loud cost you something socially. The first time the smart girl and the liked girl felt like a choice you had to make. Or maybe it was more subtle. Maybe praise in your house came for being helpful, being sweet, being easygoing. And the things you were truly brilliant at went unacknowledged. Not because no one loved you, but because no one knew what to do with that particular brightness. And so, quietly, you learned to manage it, to release it in careful doses, to make it less visible so it was less of a complication. Over time, the self-monitoring became automatic. You stopped noticing it as a choice because it stopped feeling like one. It just became how you moved through rooms. But here's what I want to be honest with you about. There is a cost to this, a real one. The cost is that people don't know what you actually think. They know the edited version, the careful, softened, qualified version. And so the relationships you're in are partly built on a version of you that is strategically smaller than you are. That is lonely in a specific way, because you are surrounded by people who care about you, and also, they don't fully know you. The cost is that your ideas sometimes don't make it into the room. Your solutions stay internal. Your insights get borrowed by louder people who don't hedge. And you watch, and you say nothing, because saying something would require claiming something. The cost is that a woman who is brilliant and doesn't know it, or who knows it but won't say it, is a woman who is not fully in her own life. But here is the other truth. The one I want you to hold alongside that. What you built, this ability to read rooms, to understand dynamics, to hold complexity quietly, to see what others miss and wait before speaking. That is not a weakness dressed up as a flaw. That is a form of intelligence most people never develop. You were not too much. You were in a room that didn't know what to do with how much you were. And the work, if there is work to do, is not to become louder or more aggressive, or to perform confidence you don't feel. The work is quieter than that. It is simply learning to say the thing once without apologizing for it, to let the thought be in the room, to stop reaching for the hedge before you've even finished the sentence. The emergency that trained you to be small is probably over. You just haven't gotten the signal yet. Drop an 8 in the comments if this is the first time someone has put language to this for you. I want to leave you with a question. Not about now, about then. When was the first time you remember knowing something and choosing not to say it? Not because you weren't sure, but because something told you it wasn't safe to be that sure out loud. How old were you? What was the room? What did you decide about yourself in that moment? Leave it in the comments. You don't have to explain the whole story, even just the age, even just a single word. If this stayed with you, the next video goes somewhere close. The psychology of women who stopped chasing love. What's underneath that, where it comes from, and what it actually costs? Watch it next.